The IFP says the civil unrest last July was a culmination of events which were a result of political volatility caused by the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. Today is exactly a year since a massacre in Phoenix where more than 30 people were killed, allegedly due to racial tension in that community, which was exacerbated by the rampant looting and destruction of property. Newzroom Afrika politics reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo is live for us in Durban this lunchtime. And Ziyanda, it's quite a claim that the IFP is making about how the situation internally in the ANC ultimately led to the chaos. Put that in context for us.
Well, it's also an observation, Tembegile, that's been made by that expert panel report led by Dr. Ziyanda Afrika, that the internal factional battles of the ANC caused instability in the country. But also, when you look at what today is commemorating, it's exactly a year to the day when all those lives were lost in Phoenix. And Kulego Hlengwa, who speaks for the IFP nationally, you would know about then the tensions in Phoenix. You have quite a strong constituency in that area, and I guess what I want to firstly kick off with here is how should we characterize what happened in Phoenix a year on with the benefit of hindsight?
Well, it was an unfortunate incident, one which as a country we need to draw very serious lessons from. That racial intolerance amongst others continues to characterize that discourse, but also conflict management in the country continues to find itself wanting, simply because there's a lack of leadership and a failure to continue the agenda of nation building. The country is highly polarized, and the ripple effects of that are the kind of things that we saw in Phoenix, and we once again convey our condolences to the bereaved families and hope that the country draws serious lessons out of it. It's certainly something that should not have happened, but is also a failure of leadership and a failure of law enforcement in South Africa. The flip side of the coin, if you look at the issues of the July unrest, that hungry people are angry people. And the economy continues to be in the doldrums. The socio-economic realities for a majority of our people, including 25 million people who are unemployed, who should be in employment. You look at the cost of living, and it tells you that the country is in trouble. So whether it's the petrol price hikes or whether it's the ongoing perennial headache of ESCOM, a lack of economic growth, a lack of economic development, and corruption, from whatever vantage point you look at it, the majority of our people who are previously disadvantaged find themselves presently disadvantaged. The inequality gap is a trigger for all these things. Does it condone the behavior? It doesn't. Yeah. But we need to look at root cause, and the fact that our people really find themselves in the kind of conditions that they're in is the clearest indication yet of how serious things are.
You're mentioning these things, which first thing that comes to mind, it means that there's a possibility that this could happen again. But also, you know, I've just had a conversation with KZN leader Francois Rogers, and he was saying that their assessment is that we're still not prepared for a possible or future occurrence of the magnitude of the unrest that we saw last year. Is that the same sentiment that the IFP as the official opposition in this province shares?
Of course. For so long as we have not learned and drawn the lessons that we should have, insofar as beefing up the law enforcement agencies with the necessary capacities, knowledge, skills, and expertise, the intelligence services in this country are a shadow of their former selves, actually, and virtually non-existent. The warning signs have been there insofar as the lack of capacity, intelligence. Look what happened in Vuwani. Over 20 schools got burnt, and yet you are unable to pick these things up. You look at the strikes that are taking place on the N3 insofar as the trucking problem is concerned, particularly at Moy River. None of those things are happening. What is happening, intelligence. Look at this past weekend, the tavern assault that is going on and the massacres taking place there. The crime syndicate and the lawlessness in the country is steps way ahead of the law enforcement agencies. The country is not out of risk insofar as unrest are concerned, simply because the daily lived material conditions of our people have not changed. Secondly, is the fact that the internal problems of the ANC along the lines of its broad church outlook are causing policy uncertainty and ideological divergences which are making it difficult for government to take decisions. Insurrection, no insurrection. That kind of nuanced debate of semantics doesn't address and resolve the problem. So the confusion within the ANC in itself is probably the greatest single threat to the country's stability, because it spills over into government and governance and actually the running of the country. As things stand now, we've got no confidence that the law enforcement agencies would be able to withstand another unrest. Finally, you will recall that it fell upon Prince Mangosuthelezi last year to call on the president to bring in the SANDF to stabilize the situation. But even there was dilly-dallying, because it's less about action and more about the political nuance debate about correctness and the sensitivities which the ANC is confronted within the province around former President Jacob Zuma is a stumbling block insofar as assertive decision-making is concerned. So it had not been for that kind of voice of reason and from Prince Mangosuthelezi amongst others, and communities actually standing up and defending their own communities. Look at what happened in Ulundi and so on. It tells you that we are in a predicament of law enforcement agencies that are not going to be able to deal with the future risk. And it is on the horizon. It's not a matter of what will happen, it's a matter of when.
Let's talk then about justice for those who lost loved ones in the civil unrest. Over 350 lives lost, and yet when you look then at the cases that are ready to go on trial, it's only a very small percentage. If I stand to be corrected, only 3. And even still, it seems that it's not even for murder. What should happen to the families who lost loved ones, 350 lives, where there isn't anybody charged for murder or culpable homicide or anything like that? I mean, where should they turn to? And what are you doing in the legislature in this province to tackle that?
Well, the prosecutorial responsibilities are not a provincial competence, and so this is a matter which we'll have to take up at national. But the issue is that the NPA in itself has been found wanting on numerous occasions on many things. But the ultimate reality is that the failure to pool and share resources amongst the law enforcement agencies insofar as investigative processes are concerned to lead to successful prosecutions is wholly absent in the country. They're working in silos. And that on its own is causing the kind of outcome that we have. We've been down this road before. Look at what happened at Marikana, for example. The people are still calling out for justice to take place there. And so for so long as the issues of capacity are not addressed. Secondly, this is about political will. There has to be decisive leadership insofar as how the SAPS do their work. And what you have right now is a very angry minister of police not providing strategic direction, but largely on an emotional rant about things. That is what is characterizing government as things stand now. Look at what happened at WIPS with the Minister of Public Enterprises. You are not getting the leaders whom have been deployed actually tackling these issues in a manner which inspires confidence. Whether we agree or don't agree is secondary, but demonstrate being in charge so we can benchmark how we hold you accountable. So there is a whole defragmentation what is happening. There may be a need for a special tribunal to actually look at the cases of the July unrest so that you can fast track the prosecutions and bring closure for families as well, as along the models that you have of the special tribunal dealing with the corruption issues and working with the SIU, and you've seen the successes there as well. But that can't be a norm. Or it can't be the default position that every time there's a blockage in the system, we have to create something new. Because what it tells us is then that the system is broken.
Yeah.
And we have to fix the system. The courts are overwhelmed quite clearly as well in some of the prosecutions. So this is about building up capacity and advancing the necessary resources into those institutions.
All right, Tembegile, that's Mkhuleko Hlengwa. He speaks for the IFP nationally, but of course reflecting then on the political volatility that was existing and created a fertile ground here in KwaZulu-Natal following the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma, then leading into that civil unrest, which also saw a massacre taking place in Phoenix, which is exactly a year to the day where that actually took place. And of course, touching on a number of issues, socio-economic issues, which create an even more fertile ground for a possibility of seeing such unrest reoccurring once again in our country.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, live for us in Durban. Ziyanda, thank you.